Yeah.
Right, we're live. Evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. And welcome to our guests today from Severn Trent Water. Any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Minutes of the last meeting, can we agree that they're correct and noted? Yep.
Just on that, on another board, what happens with kind of recommendations is that they made sure that they go into the work programme or they're carried forward all the time. They're reminded that they need to be addressed. Do we do that here with this job?
So we've got a list of the future items for this is the last meeting of this year. So we've got a list of items that will then be put forward for the next municipal year.
Yeah, good, yeah.
We would also keep track of the recommendations
Yeah.
that we've made. Yeah. Okay, right.
Sorry, Chair, just got the late item. Just got the late item.
Yeah, late items is well, yeah, okay. Late items to be introduced by the chair, none. Is anybody want to declare any interest in the topics? No, that's
I have
fine.
no shares in Severn Trent.
No shares in Severn Trent. There you go. We've done that. Minutes we take as noted, so we'll move on to the first agenda item, which is the sewage discharge of rivers. And I'll welcome our guests who go to the presentation, I believe. Just to sort of set the context, the reason we've got this on the agenda is because we had a full council meeting where we discussed the reports and information that was coming through about discharges into our rivers of sewage. And I understand that that does happen when there's over flooding and the system gets challenged. But we were made aware of that in Derby North. There were 93 sewage dumps over 21 sites. In Derby South, which is the two parliamentary constituents. So we're really concerned as councillors, members, and also because of our constituents who are concerned about the environment and having our rivers and waters which are less polluted or clean and environment. So that's the context in which we sort of passed the resolution at full council, saying that we would ask Severn Trent to attend this scrutiny board, which covers communities and neighbourhoods, and to hear what you are doing regarding this area. So I understand you'll be doing a presentation which gives us a wider picture and understanding of what Severn Trent is about and what your priorities and strategy and plan is. But that is an area that we certainly are interested in. You're here and invited, and thank you for attending to do the presentation, and will hopefully answer some of the concerns and the questions we may have. Okay.
Thank you very much for the context. Do you want us to introduce ourselves before I drop into the slide?
Just to say, there's elected members here. I'm the chair, Ardia Dinser.
Councillor Paul Hazelgrave.
Councillor Pross.
Councillor Angie Tatwell.
Councillor Joe Nature.
Councillor Joe Nature is the chair of another
Corporate Services Scrutiny Commission. I'm here actually for another part of the agenda, but I think this is relevant as well.
Okay. So, and then the officers there. So please introduce yourselves and.
Yeah, so my name's Chris Giles. So I head up Severn Trent's wastewater recycling team. So I look after all the Severn Trent's sewage treatment works and pumping stations across our region. So firstly, big thank you for inviting us to attend today. I've got a slide deck I'll go through, which I'll just give you some headlines from before I kick into action on that. And I'll first just introduce my team.
So, good evening, I'm Emma Sharp. So I'm the operational business lead working for Chris, covering the North region. So I look after the sewage pumping stations and the treatment works in the North region, which stretches from just south of Birmingham up to the Peak District. So we've got a team of about 160 frontline ops and maintenance staff.
My name's Gareth Mead, so I work in our networks team, which is the sewers. And I've got a team of river rangers, so it's a brand new team. We're a year old, but we go out and we inspect watercourses, we inspect our assets on the watercourses, just to make sure they're not having a negative impact on the water environment.
Brilliant, thank you. So I've got a few slides to go through this evening. Happy to take Q&A as we go through, or at the end, hopefully, I can answer all of your questions through the slide deck, and happy to pick anything up as we go, or take anything away and come back to as needed. I've looked at this through the lens of basically what are Severn Trent doing to deliver beyond the government's targets in terms of protecting rivers, and particularly set out in the kind of DEFRA storm overflows and discharge reduction plan, which was mentioned in the question for this evening. But I'm going to cover it in a bit about Severn Trent, our activities in the Derby City area, our role in terms of the environment and rivers. I'm going to set out why we're actually going further and faster than any of the government expectations on water companies. I'm going to talk about some specifics in terms of Derby, of which you've highlighted a few in terms of the context. I can give you some updates on those. And then also just touch a bit about what we're doing in terms of the broader environment as well, on things like net zero on carbon, facing climate change, and a bit of advice on sewer flooding. So in terms of Severn Trent Water, we actually provide services to around 8 million people across the region that you can see on the screen. And actually in Derby, we've got 1,413 employees working on our behalf that are based in Derby. We've got call centres at Pride Park, a big site at Rainsway, and a number of operational assets and activities. And we've got about 6,000 people that we employ across our region. In terms of environmental performance, we take it really seriously. One of our absolute passions is protecting the environment, and we're really proud of our track record on that. So the Environment Agency measure water companies on something called the Environmental Performance Assessment, and that's a star-based award with 4-star being industry leading. We've been industry leading for the last 3 years. We're hopeful to achieve that for a 4th time on the bounce, which would be unprecedented in the water sector. We've achieved 19 out of a possible 20 of those stars in recent years. So it's something myself and the team and the company are hugely passionate about. We do a lot of other great things as well. So as part of our great big nature boost, we're planting over 12,000 acres of land, 1.3 million trees, and actually by 2030 we'll have restored 2,000 kilometres of river. So there's a huge amount of activity that we are doing to protect and enhance the environment. We're not responsible for rivers, but we do play a huge part in the interaction with rivers, and we're part of the water cycle in terms of our business. We've also signed up to the carbon triple pledge, something else that we take incredibly seriously, and we've signed up to be net neutral by 2030, which is a lot of activity going on right across our business. We also secured, as part of the government's Green Recovery Programme, an additional £560 million, which we're deploying in a range of schemes, mostly nature-based solutions to really enhance local communities and the environment. We also took on 500 Kickstarters. Those were individuals that were looking for opportunities for jobs, that were struggling to get into employment. We had a really good success rate in terms of people that have come into our business. We're actually the biggest intake of any of the companies in the UK. Over the last 2 years, we've supported 400 local charities with over £4 million worth of investment through our Society Fund, and a further 1.6 million in terms of the Coronavirus Fund. And actually in Derby, we invested in 17 projects to the tune of 590,000. So a real commitment to the local communities and that we service. Our school teams have also visited 83 schools in Derbyshire in 2022 and have engaged with 20,000 school children. So we do take our part in terms of environment and communities really seriously. We deliver our services for around £1 a day, and we are one of the lowest bills in England. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the sewage cycle. So we capture water, we clean it, we provide it to our customers to enjoy our services, and then we collect that for an extensive set of sewers. We then clean that up through sewage treatment works and return that in a very clean state to the environment. We do that through an amazing hidden infrastructure of pipes and assets. And we've got over 1,000 sewage treatment works, 4,500 pumping stations, and 93,000 kilometres of pipe, which I went to Australia and back 3 times. And we work on that estate 24/7 with our amazing teams working forever in this area, looking after that. And our big works is just over by Rainsway at Derby Sewage Treatment Works, which drains this area in terms of sewage from this catchment and treats that to really high standards. And in terms of our process, I'm not going to go into lots of techie detail, but broadly speaking, we capture sewage, transfer it through pipes, pumping stations then lift that over hills to get to our works. And then our treatment works, we take solids out, so things like, unfortunately, things like baby wipes, which are a real problem for us, plastics and debris out. We then settle the material out as the first stage of treatment. Then goes through a biological treatment process to take out the pollutant load. We can then add chemicals to remove more pollutants. We then scrub the effluent, settle it, and it returns to rivers at some of the highest standards globally. And we're really proud of what we do. And our works performance, asset performance in Derbyshire is exemplary. We've had no failures from our main sites, and we monitor that 24/7. So we're really proud of what we do, but we do absolutely recognise there is more that we can do, which I'm going to cover off through this presentation. And that leads us on to our role in terms of the environment and rivers. So we absolutely welcomed the government storm overflows discharge reduction plan that was published in August of last year. This really aligns with our Get River Positive commitments. So we actually published those in March of 2022, and they're underpinned by 5 pledges. And these are items that will help us restore and revitalise our region's rivers. And in there, these are firm commitments to ensure our storm overflows and sewage treatments do not harm rivers. They're to create more opportunities for everyone to enjoy our region's rivers, support others to improve and care for rivers, as we know we're only part of the solution in terms of river water quality. It's also around enhancing rivers and creating amazing habitats for wildlife to thrive, and also being really open and transparent about all our performance and our improvement plans. And we believe these commitments absolutely go further and faster than any comparable company we know of in Europe, and certainly in England. So what do those pledges mean? Well, we know a healthy natural environment is really important for our business and the communities that we look after. We know we're a really strong performer in the sector and we want to be a thought leader. So we've made these commitments to really drive in and enhancing the environment in our rivers. There's some examples here. We've done a huge amount since privatisation. We've actually reduced phosphates by 80% going into rivers, and ammonia, which is one of the pollutants that we all produce, by 72%. So we've already made big gains, and actually rivers are the healthiest they've been since the Industrial Revolution, as determined by the Environment Agency, our regulators. But we know we need to do much more. And in fact, we want to get to the 0 of the reasons why rivers don't meet good ecological status. So the Environment Agency takes samples from rivers and assess the ecology of those waterways, as well as the things like chemicals in the water. And actually, they take that assessment and they assign those reasons for not achieving good status, both chemical and ecological, to the producers of the potential pollutants in those areas. And the water industry across England is accountable for 27% of the reasons why rivers don't meet good ecological status. In Severn Trent's region, we're accountable for 24% of those reasons. And actually, over the last couple of years, we've made huge gains to reduce that further. And I'm pleased to say we're now down to 17%, but our goal is 0. So by 2030, we've committed to be 0 of the reasons why rivers do not meet good ecological status. What that really means is our rivers close as possible to their natural state as judged by the Environment Agency, and we're working incredibly hard to get there. So no harm from rivers, the 2 rivers from our operations is 0 on eggs, as measured independently by the Environment Agency. We've also committed to create 2 bathing rivers, so we recognise that we can play a role in helping in our region's areas. So on the team lead, creating and supporting 2 bathing river areas. That's significant investment. It's also things like putting in disinfection technologies on some of our outfalls and activities to support that. We can't fix everything. Things like agriculture are actually the biggest impact on rivers as determined by the Environment Agency. But what we can do is work with others. So we are working on a catchment basis to try and help reduce the things like wash off from animals, from fertiliser, those things that can get into our region's rivers. So we are supporting others, both in the farming community and much wider. We're also creating new habitats for wildlife, and I touched on some of those things earlier, like planting 1.3 million trees. And we're also being really transparent about our progress and data and how we're performing. We publish our data on our website, and we're working hard to get to a point where we can produce near real-time data in terms of our performance. So just a couple of charts on this slide here. We are going further and faster. We absolutely have a plan to get down to 0 in terms of those RNAGs, which is really the river quality in ours, and we think that's really important. And we have plans to reduce the number of activations, those discharges that you talked around earlier. And I'll touch on why they happen in a moment.
The RNAG, what's that?
So the RNAGs is the reasons for not achieving good status. So that's how the Environment Agency go out and they sample rivers and watercourses into things like chemical constituents, so things like ammonia and phosphate. And they also look for the wildlife or the ecology, so fish, invertebrate surveys. And that's how the quality of rivers is measured. And unfortunately, at the moment, there is a lot of work to do on that, as I'm sure you've picked up in the media. And that is really, there's a whole range of people that impact on rivers, but specifically as they're measured, Severn Trent now 17% of that reason for not achieving good status. That's what we're committed to reduce.
So, on that chart, on the page chart, the bottom
Yes, that's it.
right-hand corner, where it says today 25 and 30, the 960.
Yeah, so the start point,
That's
it.
fields.
so 960 is the RNAGs that Severn Trent are accountable for. And we'll reduce that to 700 by the end of 2025. So we work in these 5-year regulatory cycles, which sets customers' bills for that period. And we use the money then to invest in assets. And then in the next regulatory period from 2025 to 2030, we're going to invest a significant amount of money to get down to that 0 position. And the other little chart is the reduction in terms of the average number of activations in terms of those numbers that you quoted. So what we can do there, I'll touch on a bit more detail and specifically for Derby. We've started at 27 in 2021 as a full year. We then got down to 25. This year we want to get to below 24. And then by the end of this 5-year period, we want to get to 20. I'll just touch on some of the government asked in terms of those targets. So government targets, water companies, they've stated will only be permitted to discharge from a storm overflow where they can demonstrate there is no adverse ecological impact to locally. This target must be achieved for at least 75% of storm overflows discharging in or close to high priority sites by 2035. We're looking to go much faster than that. And those high priority sites, things like sensitive environmental areas, so things like triple SI, sites of scientific special scientific interest. All remaining overflows must be discharged close to high priority sites by 2045 and all remaining sites by 2050. So those are the government's targets on that. We've committed to eliminate all operational harm and ecological harm by 2030. So again, much faster than the government's pathway on that. The next one is water companies must significantly reduce harmful pathogens from storm overflows discharging in or near designated bathing waters. That's specifically the water's been discharged through DEFRA as a bathing water, whether applying disinfection or reducing the frequency of discharges to meet Environment Agency's spill standards. So we're actually investing record amounts to reduce spills, but also we're reducing 2 bathing rivers where we are installing early disinfection technologies so people can enjoy water at those bathing rivers within our region. The next commitment is our storm overflows will not be permitted to discharge above an average of 10 rainfall events by the year 2050. So we've already committed by 2025 to get down to less than 20. So again, we're working really hard to go significantly faster than the 2050 target. Government's projection for that is that will cost the sector and bill payers around £50 billion nationwide. We're committed again to go further and faster, and we're spending over our allowed financial investment through these periods. So we're going to go much faster than that, and I'd just like to talk around a bit more about RNAGs. It's really important because that's the real test of river health. So in England, there are 34,254 RNAGs. We've got 5,440 that the Environment Agency said are to do with Severn Trent, and 906 days is attributed to our activity. So 5,500 roughly are in our region, 960 are due to our activities, and we've reduced that already down to 17%, and we'll get to that target of 0 by 2030. So to bring to life an example, this is the Derwent lower area, which roughly matches the Derby City Council area as determined by the Environment Agency. And in terms of that, what you can see is there's 3 water bodies that fall specifically within this area, and the Environment Agency's data at the bottom talks about the status of those water bodies, and in this case they're either moderate or good. And specifically, I broke those out into these areas. So the excuse me if my pronunciation isn't perfect, Brook, Chaddleston, Brook, and obviously the River Derwent. So in total, for the top one, the total RNAGs in that water body, so they're bits of watercourse that are broken down by the EA, is 9 of those. Severn Trent are responsible for 2 of those. The reasons why it doesn't meet basically a good standard. 78% are not attributed to Severn Trent, and we are absolutely working to reduce our 2. At Chaddleston Brook, there are 7 RNAGs in terms of breaking that water body down. Again, we're responsible for 2, and 72% are not attributed to Severn Trent. And then in the River Derwent, obviously the largest water body, there are 12. We're responsible again for 2 RNAGs within that area, and 84% are not attributed to Severn Trent. And we have a plan to work on all of those. What that means is that's investing in our sewage treatment assets to reduce and make the consents tighter. And most of these actually removing phosphate. So we already treat to a very high standard. There are new technologies coming out that means we can treat to an even tighter standard, and that will remove the phosphate coming out of our sewage works to our fair share. That's how it's determined by the Environment Agency. We've got investment plans to enable to do that in the next 5-year cycle. To then move on to
one example, phosphate. That's our RNAG, is it?
Correct, yes.
So saying that, what's the level it is, and what level are we trying to achieve?
Yeah, so for instance, on this chart, so in the Derwent lower, the Chaddleston Brook, we've got the all of the details on it, and the classification states that watercourse is moderate, and the one linked to ours, that's moderate in terms of the quality of the water. And our classification element by the Environment Agency is phosphate, and our sewage works within that area will currently have a phosphate consent. They're normally around 2 to 3 milligrams per litre, some can be as high as 5 milligrams per litre. Some of the modern technologies that are coming through now can actually treat phosphate down to about 0.25 milligrams per litre, so like a 4 or 5-fold shift in terms of performance. So we're investing to take more phosphate out down to absolutely our fair share, and to take the quality of the effluent. So we will none of the reasons why those rivers don't meet good status. The rest of the phosphate load is actually mostly things that some of that comes from industry, some of that comes from highways, drainage, runoff and things. Quite a lot of it comes from agricultural land. So for instance, fertiliser spread or animals and agriculture. When it rains, that can wash directly into riverways. And you've probably seen that where after a heavy rainfall storm, where the water changes colour in the rivers and there's a lot of sediment and things washed off. You can see out roads as well after storms. We're absolutely doing our bit. We are supporting farmers, and we do have things like catchment grants to help more sustainable farming. So I recognise we can help on that as well. But we're going to get to 0, and then we're going to provide some thought leadership really in terms of how.
So naturally the water should have hardly any phosphate.
Yeah, hardly any. There is so even when you get to kind of really good standards in terms of natural standards, through seasonal cycle, river quality can change, and even when there aren't humans present in terms of, I'm a biologist by profession, you can get a natural breakdown of things like plants, animals and materials into rivers. But the measure the Environment Agency uses gets to as close as natural as possible and takes some of those things into account. Yeah, it will significantly reduce phosphate watercourses. And then the next bit is around those storm overflows. So you mentioned the activation numbers and the number in terms of that can happen. So in this area, we've broken down to Derby North and Derby South. So in Derby North, on an average basis, so we've got 29 storm overflows within that catchment, and on average they activated 15 times over 2021. And in Derby South, we've got 40 storm overflows, and they activated on average for 14 times. So we know there's more work to do in reducing storm overflows, and we're really focused on that. I just wanted to check, is everybody aware of how storm overflows work and why they're installed? So let me just give a quick flavour. So this is actually from the Environment Agency. I'm not sure, I won't risk the video. There's a really good video on the Environment Agency's website. But fundamentally, we've over many years since really the Victorians invented sewage systems, particularly Basildette, rainwater and sewage was collected in the same pipes called combined or combined systems. Today, we build separate systems which take the foul or sewage water directly to the sewage works, and separate surface water systems which collect the rainwater and take them off to the rivers. However, we've got quite a long legacy of pipes which operate in a combined way. What that means is there's plenty of capacity for foul water or sewage. But when it rains, that also gets into those combined systems. And as a pressure relief valve to protect people's homes and businesses from flooding, storm overflows were installed in the system like a pressure relief valve system. So a bit like your bath, you've got the little overflow. If all the bath spills and kind of wrecks your floor and goes through the ceiling, it's got an overflow that goes back. Storm overflows were installed to protect people's homes from flooding.
So otherwise the water would back up and
exactly right.
stay in people's.
And so if they didn't activate, they would literally come out, unfortunately, in people's homes through toilets, through manholes in people's garden, and cause quite serious flooding. There's many homes which are protected and many gardens and businesses in that manner. And they've been installed over a long period of time. A lot of that was done in the Victorian era, but also after both world wars, there was extensive building, particularly in urban areas. And that was seen as the best way of installing those systems. Unfortunately, through things like climate change, through urban creep, you've probably heard about, where there's lots of concrete and tarmac going over grassed areas, people's front gardens, lots of our urban areas have grown. When it rains, that water very quickly now gets into the sewer system and leads to very dilute sewage being activated through a storm overflow and going directly into the watercourse. They are permitted by the Environment Agency, so they're not illegal discharges, they are legal permitted discharges. However, we recognise we would like to have much less of them. And frankly, if we were building a new system today, we wouldn't build it in that way. But we have got this immense legacy of assets in the ground that we now need to work for and address.
How many to be permitted, and what number is it for?
So across our whole company, we've got 2,600 storm overflows. They're all permitted by the Environment Agency. Most of those existed before privatisation. In fact, many go back many years. There's very few that we've ever asked for over the last 30 years.
There's sort of specific sites which are identified.
There's specific sites. So
the overflow, the pipes will sort of.
And I think the important part is it's a permitted activity. So, you know, you read about it in the press and you were sort of saying the hours that they discharge. It's a sort of the activities permitted by the Environment Agency. So the pipes and the overflows are designed so they discharge in a certain way at a certain time.
That's right. And look, we know we like them to activate a lot less, and that's why we've committed to getting down to less than 20 and then to get down to less than 10. And we think it's really important that we're doing our share in terms of investment. We would also welcome support. So some of the reasons they're activating more, you might be aware of kind of Schedule 3 in terms there's an automatic right to connect to the sewage network. So we're not a statutory quantity on the planning process, and developers and others can just connect to our system. One of the problems with that is a lot of surface water from development is being connected into the existing system. And actually, that's not great for our assets and our customers. So one of the things we'd really like to do We'd like sustainable urban drainage systems and developers to actually create surface water separation and disconnect that from our system. That's something we're really keen on. It's actually something the government's looking at the moment and has been adopted in Wales and Scotland. So that would really help, because for new developments that would take out the rainwater from the system, that's really important. There are other things that we can do.
So how does that? So there's a new development. They have their own separate way of.
That's it. So
disposing of the water.
if you imagine, the wastewater would be collected for a separate pipe system that goes straight to the sewage works and be treated to a really high standard. And we would also, it would separately collect the rainwater from people's roofs, drives and roads and take that directly to the water course. That's rainwater with no real pollutant load in it. And rather than having all that rainwater go into the system, which basically fills it up and then it would need to activate to protect homes. So most systems can be built separate. You may have seen on some of these new developments, these it's like not beautiful ponds being built and they've been built on the edge of development. That captures that surface water, slows it down, settles any sediment. Actually, that's a really good thing for the environment and for local communities. That's what we advocate.
So any development, are you saying you don't have a input or there's no condition that they should have that slowing down the surface water?
Yeah. So we're not a statutory consultancy in terms of any developments. That sits with the council and the lead local flood authority. We can input if we become aware of an issue to the lead local flood authority or the environment agency, but we're not part of the formal process. And also it's only advisory best practice guidance in terms of sustainable urban drainage systems or surface separation. So at the moment, developers can choose to connect into our combined system. So we'd really like that to be
Is that
the future adopted by government, but it shouldn't have.
something that you don't actually become aware of many developments?
Sometimes we don't become aware yet until it's too late, or we have to take that material in and then invest quickly to make sure we have got the capacity. So generally it works that we look at the plans that are produced by the local authorities. We try and see where development is happening and then try and invest in ahead of that, particularly for the foul water sewerage, so we can support development. But the surface water should really be separated.
Sort of, you get it clear as to what your ask is. Then
Yeah.
maybe we can sort of consider
Definitely.
recommendations from City
We
Council.
can absolutely provide that.
But just on, with modern build, do they use soakaways as much as they should do? Because I mean, that would,
It's a great question.
so it wouldn't go through your system.
Yes.
It's retained in the area, but it's not harmful because it's rainwater. It's goes down in the soakaway.
And some developers, yes, do use soakaways effectively. Even things like, say, in my garden, I've got kind of a water book to connect. I take rainwater off my roof and water the garden in the summer and those things. There are some really good practices like that. Soakaways, rainwater capture that can actually be used really effectively.
Yeah.
What we have seen though in some areas is soakaways aren't used much in terms of maximising the number of homes and activities, and sometimes it can be difficult to have enough area to let
Absolutely. Geology as well.
Geology,
So
surrounding conditions. So there's a real mix, but yes, we definitely do recommend some areas, things like soakaways. So yeah, so storm overflows are a legacy really. They're things that in the future we hope we can design out and work with developers, councils and the government to get surface water or rainwater out of the system. We actually have plenty of capacity for sewage. What we don't have is plenty of capacity for all of the rainwater, particularly with climate change and all of the urban creep and development. And that really is a challenge. That's why in some areas, so up in Mansfield, we've actually got a really pivotal project as part of green recovery, which is looking to disconnect a lot of surface water, install things like rain gardens, permeable paving surfaces, to actually take surface water out of the system to protect flooding for local residents, for the local authority. And actually we're co-located with Mansfield Council as we progress that scheme. So it's a bit of a trailblazer project, but we would like to do more of that into the future. So that's storm overflows. And just a few investment examples at sewage work. So in Derby, we've got a really sizable works, one of our. We have invested in things like renewable energy generation. So we do produce renewable energy and renewable biogas at the site, which powers local homes. And we do have some wind turbines in Severn Trent PLC on site.
Sorry,
as well.
where there's one in Duffield, Derby, whereabouts in Derby, did you say?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of sites here where we've got some investment in this cycle, and actually we'll have a large investment between 2025 and 30 at the Derby Sewage Works for growth in terms of growth of the Derbyshire, so in the Derby City area. And then at Duffield, we've got some substantial investment this part of the size of the site, and then at Kilburn, which helps feed into the catchment, particularly to the phosphate consent we're talking about. There's a large phosphate removal scheme that's going in there for around 11.4 million. So there is investment going on in the area to support and improve the riverways that we discharge into. And then, as I mentioned, in terms of green recovery, we've investing 560 million. We're creating a lot of jobs in our region. We are creating flood resilient communities, but Mansfield, working really tightly with the local authority up there. We are creating 2 bathing rivers. We are helping our customers save water by installing smart meters. We are improving another 500 kilometres of rivers through green recovery. We're also creating decarbonising water resources. So we're going to put in the first net zero water treatment facility. And we're also replacing lead pipes, particularly in Coventry, where there's a history of lead pipes. So we're doing a huge amount of work to enhance communities and the environment. As I mentioned earlier, we're also transitioning to net zero. So while we take our role in river quality and environment important, we also recognise we want to make a significant shift to being a net zero business. So whether that's things like investing in an electric fleet, and we're slowly transitioning all of our small vehicles, company cars to electric. We want to get to 100% energy that we use from renewable sources. We're well over 50% already, and we want to reduce our carbon emissions. So there's an awful amount of activity in there. And we're also heavily impacted as business by climate change, both through things like flooding. I'm sure you didn't miss how hot it was over the summer last year and the impact that's had on raw water, particularly our reservoirs. The good news is they're starting to recharge well, and we're well on track and comfortable with that as we go into this year. But we are heavily impacted by the environment and passionate in terms of mitigating and adapting to climate change. In terms of our role, as I said earlier, really, we are under the Water Industry Act. We are responsible for domestic wastewater, surface water that gets into our system legally, industrial and commercial effluents that discharges to sewers, and we do take some highways drainage from yourself by agreement. And the Water Act does give that absolute right to connect that I mentioned earlier, meaning anyone can have their drains and sewers connected to a public sewer, and not that statutory consultancy. So it is a challenge for us in terms of ensuring our network is ready and able to receive new developments. And just in terms of flooding, I mentioned I think this group is also supports and look after flooding. Our role is very much sewer flooding, so that's where any sewerage or dilute rainwater escapes from our network through manholes, etc. We do work heavily with the lead local flood authority on things like surface water, flooding, groundwater and ordinary watercourses, but they're looked after by the local authority. And we do work with the Environment Agency, who are responsible for rivers, reservoir flooding, coastal flooding, and we do work with the Highways Agency on things like roadway flooding as well. So surface water flooding is a challenge for us all. We do work and have a lot of partnership schemes and arrangements in that space. There's just a bit I'm sure you're well aware of in terms of who's responsible in terms of the Water Management Act, but we do play a role in that. And we do things like removing rainwater that we talked about in from systems to protect from flooding or to reduce activations. So we're really keen to see things like the development of SUDs that we talked around and grey water reuse. We think there's, in terms of new home design, I think there's a real part to play in terms of water efficiency and grey water reuse. We do build extensive, bigger pipes, new capacity, new sewage treatment works. We can't keep building bigger and bigger pipes. That would be unfortunately digging up a lot of road. So really taking rainwater out is most of the solution here. And we do also protect people's homes as well from surface water flooding, particularly it's linked from our asset base. So we do a lot in your area in that regard as well. We do operate 24/7 and can and do support customers through any of those routes that are available. So that was a whistle-stop tour, but I thought I'd kind of take time for questions now in terms of any specifics that you've got.
Thank you very much. The question as we went along.
Specific.
No. Now, yes.
Yeah, Chris the Sewer. First of all, thanks for a fantastic presentation, by the way. It's quite impressive. A lot of hidden stuff we don't know about, but we've kind of got some insights. Regarding the sewage discharge, I mean, how well we expect to perform in reducing it as a matter of urgency? Where are we on that?
Yeah, so in terms of those activations from sewers, so we started off when we were. So one of the big things that's changed in this regulatory period is we've put sensors on all of those 2,600 overflows. We're one of the first companies to get to 100% sensor coverage. What that's measuring is when do they activate and how long for, which is some of the stats that you've quoted. So we've always been reducing pollutions, hence our great environmental performance. But now we've got the numbers, we know how much we've got to improve. So our start point when we had most sensors was a 27 number. We've now got down to, I think, we're just going through an assurance process because it's actually calendar year. So our 2022 data closed on December 31st, and we're going to be at our best ever performance. So we've gone from 27, went to 24. We're going to be in the region of 20 to 21. We're going to get to less than 20 by 2025. So that performance improvement is coming through. We'd like to get to less than 10 by the end of the next period. So the government wants us to get to those kind of numbers by 2050. We think we can go faster than that. So you can start to see that performance.
So please, do you think the government's ask or challenge or plan is not really sort of a prioritising this? I mean, they say 2050, which is not target. You in the industry will be 30. But is there something about the government's priority or what?
We massively
the cause?
The government's targets on this, and that the steer from DEFRA, I think it's welcomed. I think not all companies are in the same position that we are. We've worked incredibly hard to the industry leaders on our environmental performance, and we started investing early. So the reality is we want to go faster. We recognise we've got a massive role to play in this. We want to cause no harm. Our teams, we get out of bed really. Most of us are environmentalists, chartered environmentalists. Emma and the team care passionately about it. We've got a team of river rangers out there every day working communities. So yeah, we welcome the government's target. I think it's needed in terms of a clear steer. Some of it is really difficult to get to the 2050 kind of aspirations. There are some big challenges like we talked about. We're going to have to re-engineer some of our urban areas. We're going to have massive investment. Part of it also is not having a massive impact on customers' bills in a very short space of time. So the original assessment from government was England would need to spend £650 billion re-engineering our sewage and sewer pipes. Getting to the new targets is still going to be many billions, but not 650 billion. And it takes time to secure the funding, go through the regulatory process, and actually deliver the big projects that are needed in communities. So I think it's fair to have a long-term ambition. We just know we needed to go further and faster. That's why we've committed.
So what's the sort of progress in terms of having separate water flooding pipes versus sewage pipes?
Yes, it's very different for different areas. So we've got around 40% of our estate is a combined system. Most of those, unfortunately, are the urban areas, which were kind of, you can imagine, built kind of after the World Wars, etc. So in terms of reducing that, what we're going to have to do is disconnect some communities. We're going to have to build some bigger pipes, different treatments. So I can't give you an exact stat, but I believe Derby is a little bit north of 40%. But there's investment to reduce both activations and critically, it's the RNAGs piece. So the real measure of river water quality are those RNAGs as measured by the Environment Agency. And we will get there for Derby by 2030. And actually, we've got a lot of activities that I've shared that will get quite a lot of that improvement much quicker.
Just some of that. So my team, so I've got 2 people that are based in Derby. So we spend every day, we go and walk the water courses. So we look at these activation points, we sample the water, we inspect them. We work with sort of local litter pick groups. You know, we've got boats and canoes. We actually go out and join community groups to go and do litter picks. But this new team is a sort of eyes and ears. So we've got sensors that are telling us. We've also got the group now on the riverbank that are inspecting. And, you know, we're the first water company to do that. So no other water company in England have got this team that are out to sort of work with community groups. It's sort of just an example of, you know, how much further they are going.
Well, just kind of following on from Adil's question and be more specific in the sense that you're saying you're going further than the government's asking you, you're going to achieve it faster. Do you think the government's targets, which is clearly for all water boards in the country, in the UK, I assume, are they challenging enough?
Again, part of it's your start point. If we go back to the governmental targets, which is it, there's kind of a range of activities in there. And I think some are, so for instance, the 2035 dates in there, which is 75% of storm overflows discharging or close to high priority sites. I think that's a great kind of ambition to get there. And that's really within the next 2 regulatory cycles. That is pretty pacey. We just know we wanted to go faster. Yeah. We could, and we'd already made big inroads as a business. So I think there is some aggressive and punchy targets in there. I do feel we wanted to be the industry leader on this. We came out with our Get Rid of Positive commitments early. I do know other water companies will have a longer running to achieve that. So I think it's a balance of quite a lot of ambition and really our ambition matching and wanting to be that.
Yes, so
yeah, well, we've got thousands of houses going in across the city, right across, even in the city centre, we've got the whole Castlewood and that kind of area, another 850 flats in planning. So how are you coping with that increase? Because it must be quite a pressure.
It is definitely. We are looking to do a scheme at Derby sewage treatment works in the next regulatory period between 2025 and 2030, which is specifically around growth. What I mean by that is additional sewerage coming into the site and additional effluent. So yeah, we've got we recognise that's coming. We are spending around £400,000 at the moment on investigations and outline design for Derby sewage treatment works, and it's likely to be a multi-million, i.e. greater than £10 million investment in Derby. So we can see some of that coming. We know we need to make some growth investment in there. I think our ask particularly would be the least amount of rainwater that gets in from those developments, the better chance that we've got of treating that effectively and ensuring that we're reducing those activations. So for us, it's that we welcome the sewerage input. We'd really like to keep out the rainwater.
So you're saying sewage and shit is okay, it's the water.
Yeah,
it's the water that you're
we're absolutely here, right, to treat sewage to a really high standard. That's what we're about. It's about protecting public health, protecting the environment. Our big ask would be the less rainwater that gets into the system, the better. So those new developments, are they separating the rainwater out? Are they being built sustainably? And is that going to a local sustainable drainage solution? That would be ours. And if that absolutely can't happen, clearly we'll work to take that.
So, sorry, Joe?
Yeah, I recently had some problems with waterways at my house. The reason we're asking this question is quite clearly we've got a lot of pipework out there that's old. We're talking about Victorian age. Some of the pipeworks were built. I mean, quite clearly the investment that you're putting in there, you know, the whole infrastructure of coping with sewage water and rainfall water, which we have a lot of flooding already in Derby. You know, obviously there's a lot of water a lot of repairs to be done. And how are you? I think it's a bit of an impossible job for you to manage to repair what you can't see. I mean, obviously you've got a grid work, and I can see that by the engineers that the work that they've done at my house, looks very good as well, by the way. How do you envisage that time period and, you know, matching the old with the new?
Brilliant question. We have this amazing hidden infrastructure, but it is huge, and that kind of Australia and back 3 times. To your point, none of it's got sensors on it. Now, our water network has things like pressure monitors, so you can tell what's going on a lot of the time. So what we do, three things really specifically. We are installing sensors, and we're the leading company on that. We're going to install 40,000 sewer sensors in manholes, so we can actually see if there's a problem near where you live. That manhole will tell us, so we can get a team out before you have to phone us. That's a big ambition of ours, to try and become more proactive and sense it really before you know there's a problem. I think that's good customer service, and we really want to do that. So that's a big part of what we do. The next part is we do undertake a camera survey. So what our chief way of knowing how our pipe's forward is putting down a CCTV camera, either a little robot that goes along and tell us, or like a push camera. You might have seen that when it came out and did that. So we do a lot of camera surveys. What we're looking for is defects in the pipe. And interestingly, some of the things that Victorians built, they're still working perfectly. And fair play, incredible engineering, and real kind of leaders in terms of the capacity they built and the design standards.
Kind of brick built, or
yeah, we've got brick built and clay built. We've still got, meaning back to the Romans were putting in clay pipes, and actually it's a natural material that does last an incredibly long period of time. We've got loads of different materials, from plastics in the ground, concrete pipes, clay pipes. So one of the big things that we do, if anybody does call us with a problem, we put a camera down and we assess the pipe work in that location. So is there something causing a problem? Do we need to fix it? And we've got really good at new technology. I don't know if we dug down to repair it, or whether we jetted it, or we do different things, including relining the pipe from the surface.
Down, it was quite good. I think you put a sleeve on a pipe.
That's it. We've got, and those are these brilliant technologies that have come down, a bit like, the idea originally came actually from like stents that people have used to put on arteries. So yeah, we put sleeves down in, seal those in, and that actually returned that pipe. It gives another 50 years worth of great service from those assets. So it is a big challenge, but we've got a lot of good technology in terms of camera work, getting clever on fixing it, and that actually is 94% better for the environment of the carbon when you put the sleeves in and digging down, taking everything away, putting in actually really good technology. And then we've got these sensors going in, so it's a bit of an arms race for us in terms of how can we do more and more for the same amount of money. But innovation is the answer. We work really hard to do that. So we do about well over a couple of 100,000 surveys, CCTV surveys, camera surveys a year, about 50,000 repairs. So we do an immense amount of work, but it is a huge net.
I think it's important to say, if you've got constituents in your areas that are worried about their sewers, the best thing to do is to ring a number or get in touch with us, because we only know there's problems with our sewers if people let us know. So there's a range of ways constituents can get in touch. There's sort of Facebook, WhatsApp now to great people. Put the video link on, actually show the problem, and the call handler can see what the customer's telling us. So, you might have people coming to you to say, oh, I'm a bit worried about the sewer. Please let them know that if they get in touch, we can then go out and see if there's a problem. So that's really important for us. Actually, people reporting stuff to us, because if they don't, we don't know there's a problem.
that's the place to report.
Absolutely, 24/7. We've tried to make it multi-channel so it'll work for everyone. And we're committed to respond really quickly, and I'm glad to hear you had a good experience with us. Maybe the rest on sewers, if you're in communication with colleagues, peers and constituents. One of the big challenges we have, and you might have seen in the press, is actually things like black soils and greases going down sewers, and critically white. So it's not, we say baby wipes, but actually so many different of these white products on the marketplace. They're just not designed to go in sewers. They're single-use plastics in the main. They create these horrendous rag balls in the sewer. They were never designed for, and actually 80% now of blockages, pollution. So when a sewer's blocked with those and it spills out of a manhole, 80% of those are now coming from wipes, plastics that were never designed to go in sewers. It was just pee, poo and paper, the three Ps. And that's a real problem. Fat soils and greases, you've probably seen the Fatbergs, and there's the famous one in London. We have those as well, and it causes an immense amount of impact on communities because they can't then flush their toilet and use their facilities, and it can have a massive impact on the environment. So any help from the council, that would be most welcome.
What's your three Ps? People
and paper. So they all flow.
Everything else should go in the bin.
Yeah, everything else goes in the bin.
Okay, I mean, I think a couple of things come out of this for me. I don't know what members will agree. One is about, well, I think that information, we should put a recommendation that we to enhance responsivity and intelligence that they're talking about. people in their neighbourhoods reporting to the council might be one thing, but actually directly, so maybe promoting those sort of as a campaign, because urban areas, built up areas are going to get more surface flooding than anywhere else.
Yes.
Sorry,
That's a recommendation. I think we should, we're happy to sort of, after the event, with nominate sort of.
we can share some of that. We were also discussing, you know, it's sewage treatment and waste movement is quite a complex area. So if any councillors were interested to come and visit our site at Derby, we can actually explain how it works, and you know, seeing how these things operate is so much easier to explain when it's in front of you.
Yeah.
So we would send out the invites of an offer for a visit at our Derby works if anyone was interested.
Something we could offer up.
I guess it's also an education piece, isn't it? We've talked about what you put down the toilet, actually, that if we could help educate, you know, our population, then actually they might make the link between, actually, we can cause these activations. Actually, if we put less down the toilet than you know, than we need to, actually we can play a part in it. So adults education.
I think that's something that's probably worth considering and recommending to council to set up as a way forward. And the other one that sort of struck me was the one about the planning. Planning, particularly sort of or work towards a separate system for surface water versus sewage, and then sort of also sort of the mitigations after they are sort of actually in planning control, enforced or encouraged or put as a condition. It's a continuing process. So those are two, I think, recommendations we should consider putting forward. Council.
Well,
Sorry?
can I just add to your comments as well? I think
Yeah, of course.
one of the major problems that we have in developments and new developments is after the development has been done, all the surveys are carried out, but we still get flooding. You know, within areas, certainly not at my ward, there's quite a few. We've got about 600 potential development going on for housing, and even when they've built them in the past, all these tanks have gone in the ground, not been enough. I think it ties in with the planning issue around that, because it affects highways, it affects you know, local communities and so on. And that's the rainwater as well. So I don't know how that fits in, but I think.
Yeah, I think we should sort of put forward a recommendation that planning should have Severn Trent Water as an automatic consultee on any development, rather than you finding out by default or other means, so that you can have an input early on in terms of how a development is going to impact on surface water management, sewage management, and mitigations, surface mitigations to slow down.
Absolutely slow down. There's some really good best practice around surface water management plans. At the moment, it is mostly as best practice guides, and I know there's a number of discussions going on in central government about adopting, I think, Schedule 3 in the Flood and Water Management Act, which there was a recommendation by Pitt when he wrote the report, and I think that's never been fully put into law, but that would make a big difference, because that would then kind of make it a legal duty to have good surface water management plans and actually disconnect surface water. There's a real opportunity to move from best practice to kind of a legal requirement stuff. That would make a big difference, I think, for local communities where development's happening, and in terms of the amount of surface water going in.
So I think we could take that on board and recommend to the relevant cabinet member to write in support of this to the government around that particular act.
That'd be really, really helpful. And send you details of that if that's useful.
Any of those three recommendations?
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, good. And Heather's here, so you can pick that up in terms of into performance and monitoring these sort of things. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the questions. And if you need anything or you want a site visit,
Just let us know, just because I know you'd like a tour of Derby Sewage Works and see where your waste goes.
No, it's really interesting. It's when you, until you see it, it's just hidden away.
So we'll ask members, maybe set up a.
We've added it to the waste plant. You see how that operates.
Yeah, more than happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
good evening.
Safe journey.
Thank you. Okay, right, thanks, guys. Just, I'm just going to let people out or let people in. I forgot to mention one thing. I think we're going to change around the order of two of the agenda items. So we're going to have 7 first and then 6. So, hello, Heather. So we'll start with item 7 now, hardship in the city, how have communities recovered from lockdown? Heather?
Yeah, we're just waiting for Kim, and I think Kim and Bernard are going to join us.
They're just coming up the stairs.
They're coming up the stairs, so
I'm just going to load the presentation.
like a sneak preview of the presentation of the noise.
There's 2 parts to this. So Kim and Bernard are going to kind of cover the short-term aspects around, because I think your overall item was around how communities have recovered from lockdown. And so I would argue it's part of the city's, overall approach to, tackling resilience, improving resilience. So in the short term, it's very much around cost of living, and then I'll pick up the longer term aspects. Kim and Bernard have given that overview.
If we can get here, get through our security system.
Make sure that-
The space on this side,
Yeah.
or if you're only next door to.
I'm just loading the presentation.
Hello,
You will?
good, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, right, so we're on to the agenda item, which is the cost of living, and it's in 2 parts. Kim, okay, Kim, you and Bernard are gonna do the first bit, and then Heather will pick it up. Okay.
Right, thank you for inviting us this evening. I guess from our perspective, this sort of started 10, 12 months ago. There was a letter came in from the Poverty Commission, that then went to the Partnership Board. And I think all of us were working separately in terms of cost of living support, community action, as you know, had been very much working around the hub and the response during COVID and the pandemic. And it was actually coming together and saying, what can we do as a city and as partners in a city, and what are we doing, and how are we going to support our communities to be okay, to thrive as much as possible, and make sure that we're there and cross sector. And I think from my perspective, the really positive thing about this is that it's been co-owned. It's been co-owned and co-developed. So certainly very much working with partners such as Bernard, the advice agencies in the city, university, DWP, and what we did was sit down and say, actually, where can we start as a range of support? What do our community need to know, and how can we work with them and make sure that we're getting that message out there? So we decided quite quickly that actually what we need was a significant communication strategy. And that communication strategy, we decided to have a website, which hopefully some of you will have seen. And actually on that website, November, December of this year, we had nearly 30,000 hits. And that's things like the Renters Fund is on there. housing support fund. So all of the initiatives nationally and locally are all on that website, ideas, tips and advice for the community as well. But we didn't just do the website. What we wanted to do was make sure that all of our communities are able to access the advice. So we also had, through GP surgeries, local community venues, translated services as well. So working with our partners across the city, across the system, just making sure as a community they could actually access the information and advice that was out there and the initiatives. So I suppose that started the website and the phone line as well. The phone line moved over to community action. I'm looking at Heather of Burns. I'm not even sure when it did now, the community hub, sort of mid last year as well. And we've had a steady increase from 5 to 10 calls a day on the community hub calls. At 5 to 10 a day when we first took it over. And during December, there were over 700 calls from members of the public who wanted advice, support, wanted to food parcels. So what we can say is that although we're working well as a system together, and I think putting as much in place as possible, there are a lot of people out there that do need advice, support, guidance, and are wanting to access the services that we have. So the initiatives that we've had, like the community hub, like Food for Thought, and all of this really good groundwork in terms of partnerships has actually stood us in really good stead for being able to respond, work with communities. The Food for Thought, in the last 9-10 months, so since April last year, over 16,000 food parcels have gone out in the city. And that's more than went out in the whole of last year. So again, really significant numbers. But the idea behind Food for Thought was that we don't just address the food parcel issue, because it's never just about food. Actually, there are likely to be other issues there. So it's how we work together, again, as a city, and the advice is in place, and we try and support resilience. So that's been a really important part of that response as well, from a Food for Thought perspective. Talking to the team, the last couple of months, we've had lots more issues around mental health, domestic violence, also older people. Food for Thought actually hasn't had so many older people accessing services. In the last few months, again, older people are starting to come through needing food advice and support. So the whole network is really trying to sort of rise to that. Good Neighbours is something that we've done for some years now, right from the start of the pandemic. And at the height of the pandemic, we had nearly 2,000 Good Neighbours across the city. We were making sure it was all really locally managed. That dropped off quite a lot. So this time last year, it was probably about 300. And then all of a sudden, it was 30 or 40 Good Neighbours. So we've recognised that actually that's something that's really important to try and rebuild and foster. We always said it wasn't going to be about transactional volunteering. It's about working with local area coordination teams, localities teams, neighbourhood teams, working across the piece. When I say Good Neighbours, that's not the Food for Thought volunteers. That's not the volunteers down at Community One. These are Good Neighbours that have signed up to do a bit of shopping, to check in and chat, and to provide the sort of support that people are ringing into the hub for. So you know, we are managing it, and it's working okay, but there's a lot to do. And I think our communities are needing that little bit of extra coordinated support that we're all providing at the moment. I guess I think we're about to, excuse me, losing my voice. We're at about 70 now. And HAF is a programme, again, working as a system with the local authority colleagues on half-term activities programme. And
Kim, just to go back to Good Neighbours, you say you got about 70 now.
yeah, about 70.
What was it at the height of?
It was 1,500 to 2,000 at the height. But we still work with the sort of the COVID groups that are set up, and so we still do that. And if you put a call out, we know people will come forward. It's about having that planned advice and support, that almost sort of that wraparound. I think that's the bit that we're missing at the moment. So we're putting quite a bit of resource into doing that.
Kim, don't you think some of actually just, they're kind of informal now? They're not part of the Good Neighbours thing, but they're doing it anyway.
I do think there's that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And I think as a city we've had that.
Yeah.
And I suppose lockdown, it made more people focus on neighbour, because everybody was in their places rather than busy rushing off doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, and actually one of the things we did say was that the reality is we should be able to create the connections and then the community should just pick it up. So I think that has happened at quite a local level. I guess because we're getting so many calls into the hub, we know there's still a gap in terms of those connections, which I suppose takes us on to sort of the other programme and the household support fund. And actually the way we've worked there with the local community voluntary sector at the neighbourhood level through the assets, local assets, food, hot drink and so on, but a bit more about that. We've had 23 providers, 5 of those were special educational needs, concentrating on 1,600 places over 4 days over Christmas. It's been really well received. We're still doing the final monitoring on that, but obviously the programme as we've gone along really successful. And what we have managed to do is get the support to children, to families, again during really quite difficult times.
Just on that, I mean, I have asked questions at council before. The holiday activities fund, it was for children with free school meals. Have we got better information about how many that they are being reached? Because there are parents out there who look at opportunities and you know, some talk about the referrals not coming enough from schools and other places that they need to sort of target the right people. And others also join in.
Yeah.
So are we monitoring how many, what the reach is into?
Definitely, yeah. We've got, I think, quite good figures. I think in terms of some schools are very, very proactive, other schools less so, and there is definitely a mixed picture across the city. I think when we designed the programme with colleagues from local authority as well and schools team, we were really keen that reach could go as far as possible. So I think in terms, I think it's around 13,000 pupils for meals.
So it's just short of 14,000 actually.
What's the number? And then do you monitor how many actually get access to the
I believe during the summer it's around 2,700.
2,015?
Christmas provision, I think it's about 1,600 places. So it's not reaching all, but what we said we would do if we had oversubscriptions in any area, try and expand the programme. So it's
that's the bit that's where we're going to find a way of sort of understanding how we do that.
How do you monitor? Yeah, I was in a meeting about half funding, and somebody described it as very profitable, which I found quite offensive. So, how do you make sure that it is actually reaching the children through the organisations?
I know the team that have been doing the monitoring are very good at what they do. So, and it is a joint team. It's our team at Community Action, and it's team at local authority, very experienced project manager, and actually the monitoring is quite tight. So, I'd be surprised if it was very profitable.
That's the way it was described to me, and I was not obviously happy about that. So.
We have a price. I mean, basically, we do set an around price. Obviously, working with some pupils or young people is more expensive than others if you've got to put transport costs in. And what we wanted to do is have a flexible programme so it was accessible as possible to all young people and families that needed it. So there are different costs across the range. Yeah, profitable. I mean, I'm not sure what to say about that. It's not something I've heard said. That the organisations ask us for what they ask us for in order to provide a service that we think is reasonable.
The feedback numbers of people, for instance, and everything, all the feedback comes back.
Definitely, we get all of the feedback. We also do visits as well, so each of the sites get visited to make sure that everything's up to scratch, that things are going well, and we find that the providers are really committed to providing quality placements. So.
I think it's a really insightful comment. I mean, let me just clarify this. 2,000 from the monitoring information you have, 2,000 are being reached out of the 15,000.
1,600, I believe, were places this time, yes.
Yeah.
But I haven't got the final monitoring today because the team was still doing it.
If you have got, I mean, that's still, still far off, isn't it, in terms of what the half is for and what it's delivering. I'm sure the people who are attending gain from it as well, because they may be sort of on the cost, but it's not reaching the target group.
It's really important to have a range of provision though, and whereas some families will come to have, other families won't want to do that. Other families, I think, if they wouldn't want to access those free school meal vouchers or do something else. I think it's just that range. It's important.
So let's look at the entirety then. There's the activities is one point. Free school vouchers. Is that, or do they mix the views? At one point, there's debate about why don't we just give all the free school meal pupils the vouchers and have a system which actually delivers them to the children who need them. And finance just going to do that 100%.
We will pick that up.
Yeah.
At a very specific
I'll come back to that
when we come to the household support.
Yeah. So, but in terms of the half as well, I mean, if you're saying to me that it's about the ambition is not to capture and make this offer available to all free school meal children, I don't know if that's what you're saying.
I mean, if we could, then that would be great. If they wanted to do it, we would want to extend those spaces. But
so, is there some sort of understanding about whether 50% is an ambition, or 20%, or 100%?
no, I mean, it's the funding that's available to deliver the programme from my perspective.
I understand that, but who's benefiting from that? The activities from it?
Yeah, the children and their families.
If the original funding is for a specific target.
And it should be that target group that's actually receiving that service. So
1,600 to 2,000 is now the capacity of the activity groups.
Yeah. The 23 organisations, yes, they have so many places, and within the funding envelope that we have, that's what we're able to deliver through those 23.
So you're delivering. You only got the capacity to deliver to 1,600 to 2,000.
Yes, yeah.
That's what the 23 is.
Yes.
That's all they can deliver.
Yes.
It's not a question of others are.
So if there was more
benefiting.
funding, if there was more funding, I would think that then we could deliver more across these. But I think it's good coverage. It's across all 17 wards, and it has to be seen in the context of one part of a bigger service.
I mean, I think it'd be two things, wouldn't it? Range of offer and also locality. So you're obviously dependent on the voluntary sector, but I would have thought a lot of the provision. So where are they based? If they're not based in an area where there's lots of kids who benefit from the facility, then they're going to have to travel, etc. But you can't do a lot about that because you can't obviously create somewhere. And the other thing, you've got this issue of anybody, I think children up to 7 get free school meals anyway, universal free school meals to 7, and 8 and above. In the same location, a lot of parents might be apprehensive that you've got 8-year-olds to 16-year-olds. So you might have to have some that are more concentrated on the younger children and some on the older children or young people. Yeah. So it's more complicated than it looks, but I think if we could get more localities in areas where there's a high proportion of children with free school meals entitlement, we might get a better uptake. And I think it's good, the uptake's really good, not just because they get fed, but because of all these social activities they do. After all that period of lockdown, their social skills being less developed than they should be, for example, and meeting different people, not just kids from their school, but kids from other schools. It's not happening as much. And it's good to mix with peers of all kinds, not just in your school, but others.
And actually, that's one of the things I did do, which I forgot to mention. I've not been as involved in the HAF programme as some of the other work. It is actually that initially we mapped out where the highest proportions of free school meals were, and actually then we targeted providers within those areas of the programme. So thank you for reminding me. I had to mention that.
Yeah.
Carry on.
It's a housing support fund.
So, the Household Support Fund 3, cunningly named because it's the third one. And central government in the last budget statement committed to there being a fourth and a fifth. With the third one that runs between the 1st of October 2022 and the 31st of March this year, this council received 2.224 million. There is no prescribed route other than there are conditions with the grant share. There are certain things that you're in scope, certain things are out of scope, but the design is entirely up to the local authority. And in this case, it's the local authority and the partners across the city as to how we want to shape the household support fund and the impacts that we wanted, the targeted impacts that we wanted to make. So this is how the scheme design is for Derby. Free school meal vouchers, which I think you touched on earlier, Chair, we allocated 1.1 million, essentially. You'll find in a minute we will overspend that because, of course, free school meal, those children eligible for free school meals number is increasing. And you'll see that we work with each of the 100 schools to determine how many free school meal children they've got in at any one time, and we match that demand. So that's free school meal vouchers, covering a bit more detail.
So there's 100% coverage in terms of preschool meal pupils are getting free school meal vouchers.
Yes, there's not 100% take up, Chair. It's usually around 85%.
Reasons for not.
Oh, multiple.
Who don't take.
Yeah, multiple reasons. There are families out there who previously may have been, whose circumstances have changed and they don't take them up. I've got to say, this might sound trivial, but the vouchers go home with the kids. Sometimes they get there, sometimes they don't. We've had a couple of that going on. I know it sounds trivial, but it does happen. So there are multiple reasons as to
how are they redeemable?
The vouchers are shopping vouchers, so you get to choose any one of 9 supermarkets.
The little Johnny can shop with them.
No, they go in. There's a covering letter with the codes, which is sent home. Either different schools do it in different ways, as you'd expect.
There's a way of it reaching the parents.
Exactly, and some schools have a method where they actually redeem the voucher codes for the parents and give them the redeemed vouchers. Others literally hand it to the parents at the gate. And for the small minority, there are some that go home with kids because they don't actually see the parents in any particular setting. So a bit like you were saying earlier, Councillor Hazelgrave, it's a bit more complex than, but we wouldn't be anywhere with these free school meal vouchers if it wasn't for the partnership network of 100 schools. It would be a nightmare to distribute 14,000 vouchers otherwise. But it's usually around, it's 100% because we ask the schools for what their numbers are. Yeah. It's about 85%, 85 to 86% take up. So the other thing that I just need to point out there is that because of the vouchers that we use, they expire after 3 months and we get the money back and we recycle that back into the scheme.
15%.
Yeah. And it comes back in and we recycle it and make sure that it actually goes out again. Because, we just need to make sure every penny goes to one household. So that's number one. Number two is an online claim form. So that's a form which we'll talk about, which is providing the same sorts of vouchers. You can be referred into the network, and we'll talk to that in a minute. And it's also open to the public to make their own applications. Talk a bit more about that. In a minute, that's 588,000. And then there is the community network piece, which is brand new for this. where there are 51 organisations, and Kim will talk to this more in more detail, but we're looking to create warm welcome hubs where actually they are in a better position to reach the communities we don't reach. And we've already got some very good evidence of that, where it has been a success, because we are getting through these organisations to residents that we don't ordinarily see or hear from. So all of that's the 3 components in Derby this time. Small balance, and we do have some administration costs. We do have to check applications to make sure they are legitimate. When we pay our own, we pay overtime to our own staff to do that. They have to be checked to see if they're on the benefits they say they're on. Essentially, that £10,000 means that the staff we're using in the housing benefit service, we can give the £10,000 to an organisation who can process the housing benefit claims, but the staff who are working on this can't. So we are maintaining the volume of and speed at which housing benefit claims. And clearly, with the community network, we need to ensure that it's managed, and it takes some managing, as you can imagine. And we pay a small figure of £15,000 to CAD to be able to do that. And right at the bottom, it says we're expecting to receive a credit of £144,000, which are these expired vouchers, which we get back. And we'll take a view when we get it back as to where or what's the best way to distribute that funding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So now move on, please. So in more detail, apologise. So as if we've covered a bit of this already. Yeah, I know it. We do send, as we've touched on earlier, voucher codes to 100 schools. Pivotal in the distribution, because these are households who are already identified as being vulnerable because they're in receipt of free school meals. It would be very difficult without these schools to be able to distribute these vouchers. As I said earlier, the voucher codes are based on what the school have on their free school meal register. This scheme, this time, the value of the voucher, the £20 per pupil per week. That does represent an increase on previous household support funds, and that is simply because we have fewer restrictions this time. Yeah, that's why that's gone up. So just reading the line of figures, 13,900 pupils received a free school meal voucher in October, which is £278,000, 69,500 meals, and as you can see, 84.3% were redeemed, and that's actually closed. That closed on the 6th of the 1st. Okay. These are slightly out of date because it was the 17th, but in December we sent 14,000 out, so it's gone up slightly for 2 weeks. So that was £560,000 that was allocated for 140,000 meals, and actually £473,000 was redeemed, which is 84.4%. That doesn't come until the 23rd of February, so that's so that's the free school meal vouchers. Any questions on that before I move on?
Just on the original figure you gave of the amount the government gave us, for the 1st of October, it was actually exactly the same amount as for the previous half.
Yes,
wasn't it?
The HSF, yes, exactly the same.
So there was no allowance for inflation. And that's really about 10%. So, or higher. So do you think there's any possibility that we can actually on the next round of funding allow for inflation?
What I can talk to is that in the last budget statement, it was the same total amount of funding for councils. It was exactly the same. Don't know what the share is going to be, but it would lead you to suggest that it would be the same share.
So we've got a shrinking pot in real terms with a larger clientele, haven't we?
Yeah, it's the same amount of money and demand is increased.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Agree. Yeah. You mind if I move on to the second component? Is an online. This is So this is the online claim form where we allocated £588,000 of that amount of money. And there are two routes into this financial support. They are the same vouchers, Chair. So they are shopping vouchers. So a family with a household with children under the age of 18 receive £120. A couple receive £100 and a single person receives £80. So we're graduating it based on the nature and makeup of the household. There are two routes in. There is a referral network, which we'll talk about in the next slide, and an application. So it's open to the public. On the 17th of January, and again, this has moved on a little bit, we had 78 claims, if you will, still in the process, which is not a lot. Basically 1.3%. So they're either brand new in, or they're being checked for the residency, or they're being checked to see that they're on the right on the benefits to say them on. You need to do that checking. We paid 4,570 claims at a total of £473,000, of which, if you move down a little bit, 93% of that had been redeemed at the time. 441,000. We put a lot of effort into ensuring that people not only get these, but they redeem them before they expire. We did also receive, we initially received £588,000, but we also, there was an underspend of 44,490 on the energy rebate scheme. So the head of Exchequer Services asked if we could distribute that, so we put it in the pot. And we now have a total of 632,000. What you'll see on the 17th of January is only just halfway through. It's just over 3 months of a 6-month scheme. We only have 24% of the fund remaining. We've spent whatever the difference is between that and 100, which we can't remember, 76%. It's popular and is needed. And from the redeeming figure, we're actually getting it to people, which is the key bit for us. Okay, so the key points to note on this is that it's taken us 3.7 days, less than 4 days from a successful claim to being paid. 56% of those awards that have been made, so 56% of 473,000 has actually gone to households with children. And 79% of those households with children are single parents. So to pick up your point earlier, Chair, about targeting, I think this demonstrates we're actually targeting this quite well. We do have some failures in terms of people putting in fraudulent claims or not providing the information that is accurate, and that's about 13%. And we're actually forecasting that this scheme will close towards the end of February, a month early, because it runs till March, or when the funding is used. It's one of those where we might turn around and say and consider the 144,000 that we've got coming back from expired vouchers and say, do we keep it open a little longer? And that's for consideration. Any questions on that?
Sorry. Rationale for that? We're closing irrespective.
We're closing because we think at the end of February, Chair, we'll have spent all of the 600. Yeah.
You spending the money you've been given, which is, this is the cash amount. It's not a question of you use it up whenever early as possible if the demand is still there. That was the government, I assume it's going directly from the government.
Yes, it is going directly from the government.
That's it.
Yeah, pretty much. But what I'm trying.
The demand is not decreasing. You know, it's not a question.
Yeah, we're given an amount of money.
All the problems of the cost of living have disappeared, are reducing. Therefore, there's less need to offer this sort of.
We are. Our role, I understand our role as a local authority is to take the money that we receive from government, which we have no say over, and make sure that we actually use it in the best way possible and don't send any money back when we get to the end of last year.
I totally applaud and support your efforts and what you're doing, but I think the more bigger picture is that if the demand is still there, it continues, Are you targeting the right types of families and individuals? There's a question mark about how the government's taking this on board. You know, it's not just any. So I think there should be we should highlight this recommendation to the council to make representations on this to government.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes, quite clearly from the information we're hearing, demand is not reducing. I think
Right.
Kim, you said earlier, it's probably increasing. But the actual funds and things are either winding down.
All the information that you get to see and get to hear about is that there is going to be, this is not a short-term challenge that we've got.
So I think if Dominic can get some more detail of the information to make this the background context in terms of our recommendation, I think we need to sort of to consider making representations to government, highlighting the what you just described.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay.
I do think we ought to, it's not a recommendation, but I do think we ought to formally thank Bernard, Kim and the team for the tremendous work that before the uptake that they've worked really hard to get on this scheme. And I think formally we ought to thank them.
Yeah.
Personally.
That's lovely to hear, because actually neither Kim or I have spent any of this money putting extra staff in place. This is being done through existing teams who already have existing full-time jobs.
Yeah.
I think that does deserve a formal mention.
Yeah.
Okay, just a quick question. What implications are in place for the people who?
Implications.
Yeah, or in place to stop them from doing anything and wasting your team's time?
The fraud team have all, it's a fraud team in the council that carry out those checks for either for residency.
Right.
And I can't speak to what they're going to do long term, but I'm sure given the nature of the role they've got, they don't leave them there forever. I just can't talk to it.
That's fine.
Great.
Just one final thing.
Yeah, of course.
Because the bit here was about partnership working and how we responded. And I just want to put this slide up to actually show you that it's changed again, but on the 17th of January, we had 222 active referrers. 17 of those were council services and 21 were council services, but 17 were organisations across the city. What has happened with the bit that Kim's going to come on to with the community network is that we are now working with organisations who are reaching people we've not seen before, and they're making referrals into the Household Support Fund. You know, so Derwent Stepping Stones have put 21 referrals into the Energy Support Scheme, which Kim will talk to, 17 of which have gone into the household support because we've never seen them before, which is the power of working with different organisations across the city, because they are actually better placed to deliver these services than we are.
You've got one school.
We've a few schools now. Yeah, we've a few schools. Yeah, there's two in that list. There's Little Over Community and St Ralph's showing it. But that's their choice. We encourage them. But they don't have as, you know, they've lots of other admin duties as well. Same position that we're in.
Just on that, though, Bernard, I think St Ralph Showing School should be St Ralph Showing CMAT. It's a multi-academy trust. There's no school called St Ralph Showing anymore.
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah, I know for sure. Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah.
My job's to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great for him working with this.
Some of these are really quite interesting because, of course, as you'll know from having local area coordinators, which are in council services, they've put nearly 100 through. 42 of which have come from our Abbey.
Yeah.
It is working.
800 bodies through the door in a month.
Yeah, it's working. It's working.
Yeah.
Kim, can I just stand up?
Yeah.
You'll be aware, sort of nationally, people talking about warm spaces. One of the things that we decided not to do in Derby was go warm spaces as such, because actually it's about people. So we were quite keen that it was about a warm welcome. And what we wanted to do was, create spaces And that also came out of that cost of living strategy. So what we wanted to do was set up a community network and actually work with providers operating at a very local level all over the city and make sure that they will open up their doors. And I think many of them would be. I mean, as a sector representative as well, I was getting voluntary community sector organisations contacting me saying cost of living, we want to be open, utility costs are going, we're already struggling. How are we going to be able to open up and make sure our community is looked after and able to access our services? So that was part of the reason, I think, for going for a community network. It's about making sure we could invest in communities, make sure those communities are more resilient. The organisations that are based very locally with their volunteers and so on are actually able to support that and do that outreach for us. So what we've done in early December, we had a shortlist of 51 organisations across the city who have all signed up to be part of the community network in the city. Had a meeting last week and 40 of them were represented at that meeting. Very small organisations to some of the bigger organisations in the city. The fund itself is total funding of £300,000 from the Household Support Fund, but that fund itself has to reach a meal and a hot drink and a place to go along to. And so what we said to those providers is, are you going to be opening up? When are you going to be opening up your communities and can people access this? So we've got a really mixed bag in terms of provision. What we also wanted to do was come together and learn from one another, support one another and make sure as a sector we were involved in the referral piece that Bernard was talking about. That's been really fantastic because in 9 days from those new referrers set up in communities, there have been 309 actual referrals into the scheme. So again, and that voucher is for a utility voucher for individuals that are finding it difficult to manage with those utilities. We're currently working with a new group of organisations as well. There's just over, I think, £80,000 left in that pot. Some of the organisations we've been working with are reaching more people than they thought might. So we've got more people coming through the door as well. I think it was quite innovative to decide to do it this way and to come up with a very different way and a different approach through the Household Support Fund. And it seems to be working really, really well. We've got really good representation in each ward. We've also got, I don't know whether we've got access to it, Heather, on the internet, sort of warm spaces. So each area, Bernard has got some sheets showing what provision we've got in each area, what days that's on. And we're trying to do that coordination piece across. It's very much community led, it's very much locally focused, locally owned. And we don't see this as short term. We see it as being about investing in communities, making sure communities are resilient, but also that they're linked in very much to localities, LAC and team members, the social prescribers as well, working out of the primary care networks, making sure what we've got is a community of trusted supporters that are able to be there and be accessible and sort of trying to work together as much as we can in quite a difficult time. The online applications we're actually going through, we recognise digital poverty is an issue for many people in our community. So what we're doing is actually saying to those organisations, can you support somebody? And if you can't, somebody else in the network can do that support piece and do the online referral form and health and wellbeing support as well. So we're doing that with the alliance work, working with Bernard and the team, working through the strategy and also through the action plan that we've established for the strategy to make sure that we've got that right information. At the meeting last week, the members were inputting into the cost of living strategy as well. So we said to them, what's missing from the strategy? What are you doing to meet the aims of the strategy? And we very much see that as an evolving document that we own as a city, not as any particular local authority or voluntary sector. It's how we work together in, I guess, what's challenging time and isn't getting easier at the moment.
So in terms of the lifespan of the house, this is a third HSF.
It is.
Are you expecting a fourth?
Government, as I said earlier, Chair, the government in the last budget statement, which I think was November, committed to there being a household support fund 4 and 5. As I responded to Councillor Hasgrave earlier, with exactly the same total amount So two more at the same amount as HSF3 is what they committed to in November.
Yeah. Then for me, when these voucher codes are going out, some go out electronically. How would people recognise their codes that have gone out?
Okay.
For the house,
Right. So there are two different sets of voucher codes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we start with the Household Support Fund,
yeah,
there are several ways in which people can pick up those voucher codes. They could come into the council house and they'll organise for that to happen. They could pick them up from the person who's referred them, part of the trusted referrer network. They could, or we can send them a post. Not been doing a lot of that recently because of the, or we can send them either via email or to their phone.
Yeah. So the ones that are sent electronically,
Yeah.
What address would they come from?
They get a covering. Every email has a letter explaining who it's from and what and how to redeem those codes.
Yeah. So
yep. And it comes from Derby City Council.
It's from Derby City.
Yes. I got there in that.
We'll get there. Yeah. I've had a couple of people.
The other voucher codes, these are energy vouchers, and they're PayPoint vouchers, and we ring every single one who's been referred to make sure they know who we are, what it's for, and how to redeem it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bernard. And thanks, Ken, for that. Helpful.
So I go into the second part?
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm going to cover this really quickly just because I'm conscious of time, and I just think Bernard and Kim have kind of, set the foundations brilliantly in terms of this being part of, a broader approach that we have as a city, in terms of working towards resilience and, trying to achieve the kind of health, wealth and opportunity for all citizens, across Derby. In 2020, kind of linked to COVID, we reinvigorated the partnership board, and COVID obviously, we went through various lockdowns, but overall, what COVID did was it really created the environment where actually partners in the city came together in a really brilliant way and achieved so much, particularly Community Action Derby worked brilliantly. In creating the community hub, and many other partners across the city also worked with them. So, I think it was just, reflecting on I think the fact that we achieved that shift of actually working very much with the city. We created a recovery plan. You may remember going back, we had a recovery plan that focused on community recovery, economic recovery, and also council recovery. However, what we wanted to do was move on from recovery. I mean, I appreciate that. I know many of us at citizens are still facing the impacts of lockdown and COVID, and we're kind of still seeing many of the kind of the factors that in a way have kind of emerged also through the cost of living crisis. But as a city and as a partnership, what we did was we kind of wanted to look forward, and what we did was we agreed 4 key themes. So resilience is I'd say one of the key ones, but also growth. So creating the kind of modern smart city, with jobs and skills for the future. Vibrant, so reimagining our city. Obviously, we've recently undertaken work in terms of engaging on our city centre ambition in particular, and green. So building on the work of the Climate Change Commission and protecting and enhancing our environment. And as part of that, what we did was we agreed city outcomes, and that's, the council was leading this approach, but it's been very much agreed with partners through our partnership board. And we now have not only MPs, group leaders, but we have kind of city leaders from community and voluntary sector, business and public sector all coming together and agreeing those.
How many members?
Sorry?
How many different partners?
We've got, to be honest, it's a good question actually. I'm sure we've got, we regularly have over I'd say probably 25 to 30. the partnership board meetings. I mean, we meet monthly. So, I mean, I'd say it's got considerable momentum, to be honest, in terms of the representation that happens. So I was going to say I'm happy to share the membership with members of the committee. I mean, certainly what we, I think what we acknowledge, and if you've heard Rachel North talk about this, she talks about this very articulately, but actually, for local people to actually navigate the systems and the services that all the different partners provide, it's really, really difficult, really complex. So what we're trying to do as a partnership is actually try and simplify it, demystify it, make it easier, for citizens to actually engage with us. And that is, I think, one of the underlying principles that we have. You'll have heard us, better together is very much part of our overall approach. It's the kind of working with the city, and that's all reflected in our council. So, in September as a partnership board, we held an away day. It was actually the first time we'd met physically. We'd been meeting virtually for 2 years, but actually it was great for everybody to come together. And as part of that, what we did was kind of review the environment post-COVID, in terms of actually what's currently happening, what are the opportunities and the challenges that we know we've got facing the city, and how do we take those forward in the medium to long term. And so we know there's a lot going on. I mean, Kim mentioned the Poverty Commissioner. I know Councillor Heselgrave, you're an active member of that. We know that is going to help us address some of the underlying issues that we know is actually contributing to cost of living crisis, but actually, longer term life chances for members of the public. So it's actually, how do we build on that, and how do we learn from that and use that as a partnership to inform the interventions that we make. It is, I mean, resilient is quite broad, so it encompasses health and well-being, and we know that, for example, the care board, the health and well-being board as well, and again, there's different strategies there. There's a health inequalities partnership, for example, which again, is trying to kind of address some of these underlying issues that we can then, take forward. So, community safety also falls into resilience, as does, I think, broader engagement we've got through the environment. So there's lots happening in the resilience space. Well, as a partnership, I mean, I've just cited some of those sort of opportunities and challenges that I think we have. Many of those are already reflected in the council plan as it stands, and also the city plan that actually we've agreed with partnership with recently. But I think, more fundamentally, what we're doing is just to underpin that is having a look at the kind of the delivery mechanisms that we have in place. So some of those boards you'll recognise, they are statutory. So Safer Communities, Health and Wellbeing, Integrated Care. But we're trying to do is kind of reconfigure, for example, what was Stronger Communities Board, Children, Family and Lives Board, towards a kind of a working group that's more directly focused on resilience. So that's kind of work in progress as it stands. But yeah, so that was I just wanted to set the scene about the kind of medium and long term approach to resilience that really just, I think, builds on, the great work that Bernard and Kim do.
Comments, questions?
We've been carried out.
The only one I have, what Kim and Bernard have highlighted, identified the need, but probably heightened by COVID and the cost of living. It's always been there. We've, not because the council wanted to, but because of funding reductions, we stopped providing funding for community organisations. They were sort of in need, and sort of that would disappear. So the recovery bit and resilient bit, if the resilient is going to be just about, oh well, the community can, if you put them in the right path, they'll take care of it and they'll look after it. I don't think that's going to be the reality. So I think we've got to be cautious about how moving, like you said, moving from recovery to something sort of making communities resilient. The biggest factor in that has been funding by watching it across the different bits. And if the funding either stays the same or stops, I don't know what do you think the plans are, and that might, but we may revert back to where we have been for the last 10 years. You know, and Kim seen the transition because how the increase funding was different for all of those. So that's just a comment from me. And partnership better together. There are the vision and the ambition is really good, but without resources and funding to back it up, I don't think the resilience is going to just grow out of us organising and coordinating local community groups better. By itself, it's going to make it.
May I, Heather? Yeah, Chair, if I can. I think it's about recognising that the voluntary sector and community sector is incredibly good, valuable, it isn't free. I think we've lost a lot of good organisations in the city, but actually the ones that are still there are quite resilient. And I think there's a real opportunity through the Better Together work and the way that we're working now to almost, you say, it's sort of like shuffling around what we have got, and it's actually about recognising where that resource is best placed. And I think that's the other thing. I think we're having those mature conversations now and that dialogue as a city, which I don't believe we were having a few years ago. And for me, that's where we'll make that impact and that difference. It's recognising that it doesn't always have to be done in this way. Actually, we can do it in that way. Hence the alliances and the other work. So I think you're absolutely right.
That's just right, unfortunately. Comment. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for that presentation. It's been interesting. Moving on to the last agenda item then is the census. Yeah, please go.
Natalie's just going to put the presentation up. So I'm just going to introduce this. Natalie's actually going to. Natalie's the expert here.
Natalie has sent it to me only a few days ago.
She has indeed. I know it's very. Now, obviously, the agenda item here was kind of census 2021. Future demands on the city. Now, I think what it's relevant to say at this point is, I mean, obviously, this is the biggest data source, very rich intelligence. It's the biggest data source we've had for 10 years because the census is only undertaken every 10 years. In terms of us fully understanding the implications from the census, it's actually really too early to say because the office.
How many years does it take to make sense?
Probably another set. The Office for National Statistics is continuing to release different bits of it. So actually, the information that Natalie's going to share is just really hot off the press. In actual fact, it's only come out over the last few weeks, and there is more to come. So, in a way, this is a kind of a really initial, headline. This is what the information is telling us. What we need is a bit longer as a council and as a partnership, I think, to fully understand what the implications are. Yeah. Because, to inform our service planning going forward, our future projections, what it means for funding. So, I know that was, when we had the premiere, I know that was one of the things that you were keen to know, but it's just at the moment, it's too early to say. What we've got is the headlines, and then perhaps we can come back later in the year with a bit more around the, what this means for us as a city.
I think that would be helpful. So if you can get the headlines today, I know it's a bit late and we're going past the 8 o'clock.
We have, hour. Yeah.
And so let's have the headlines, but I think it will need, I think I recognise that what you're saying is that we get more understanding of what it means later in the year, and we should agenda that for the future meeting.
Okay. So just quickly about the census. So it took place in March 2021, which is a long time ago now. Happens every 10 years, and like you say, it asks us questions about us, our age, ethnicity, religion, things like that. Also our homes, where we work, and people who live within our homes. So it gives us a picture of all people and households in England and Wales. So incredibly useful data, and is used to help decide how to plan and fund our services. Just a couple of things to bear in mind is it was the first digital census. So the Office for National Statistics, who were running it, did want to get people to complete it online first, but there were household surveys, paper surveys that they sent out, or that people could request if needed. And also just that it was a snapshot during the pandemic. So going forward, we'll be able to look at it and understand what characteristics were overpopulated at that time. But also just that it might have affected where some people were living or what they were doing at that time. So it's important just to bear that in mind. And yeah, I will just run through some of the headlines from the demographics. There's lots of other bits we've not looked at yet in terms of health, education and employment, but we will get round to that. There's so much better, as I was saying. So in terms of the population estimate for usual residents, the population size for Derby has increased by 5.1%, which was slightly lower than the increase for England and East Midlands, and our household estimate is now at 105,700. And you can see, you don't really need to see the figures in that graph, but the trend line is just the
And we squeeze so many sardines in a tin, can't you?
The trouble is, our borders are not expanding with the population, so the population is moving into neighbouring boroughs and districts.
Yeah, I mean that trend line is just our our population estimates, and then is a little bit of a jump, which we probably thought the estimate was not quite where it should be. And yeah, just comparisons to other regions. And then the next slide is just what you're talking about, the higher increases in areas south of our border. So population South Derbyshire increased 13.3%, which was one of the highest in East Midlands. So yeah, I think a lot of the cities tended to have slightly lower increases, maybe because people weren't necessarily living there or moved out, but yeah, certainly South Derbyshire had a higher increase. So in terms of age breakdown, so the graph there just shows the age groups as a percentage of the population in Derby in the bar charts, and the orange line is England. So you can see that the younger age groups tend to be higher in Derby than the national rates, and the older ages not so much, which I think is probably still the same as we have in previous estimates as well. And this just gives you an idea of which age ranges were increasing compared to 2011. On the left is the one for England and right for the one on Derby. So it tends to be the same kind of trends generally in terms of which age groups are increasing and which are decreasing. So we did see a decrease in 0 to 4 age group, also 15 to 24 and 40 to 49 age groups. Then once you get past 50, they're all increasing. And yeah, there's a lot more detailed information if you want to look at it by single year of age as well. So in terms of household size, 31.3% of households in Derby are single person household, which is slightly higher than the national and regional averages. 2 people households, 31.9, which is slightly lower than our regional average. And sorry, that graph on the left there is just a comparison with local authorities. I think they're really interesting when I look at them. It might be hard to see.
They have this distance.
And then the bottom group there is households with 5 or more people, which Derby has got a higher percentage than national and regional averages. Interesting to look at it that way. The census also breaks down households in terms of the people that live in them and the family group and makeup. So you can look at that detail, but in terms of, well, apart from the increases in the 1 person households, There was also increases in families with non-dependent children, so that was above 15 years of age, I think, or not in education, which is possibly not surprising, and that was for both couples with non-dependent children and also lone parents. And we've also had an increase in households with older people, although it's still lower than regional and national averages. So move on now to country of birth. So for Derby, we were at 78.7% born in England, which is a reduction from 84% at the last census 2011. You can see on the left the other countries where people reported being born. In terms of increases, we had a large increase in people born in Romania compared to 2011, which reflects the national trends. And other notable increases were Pakistan, India, Poland, and other EU countries.
So in a way, Derby is more diverse. That was what we obviously suspected and what we knew was happening, but actually this just confirms it.
Yeah, definitely. And you get more information about that when you look at the ethnic groups. So just looking at those high-level ethnic groups, all of those have increased apart from the white group, with 66.2% of Derby residents identifying as white British, which is a decrease from 75.3% in 2000, and an increase in the Asian British or Asian Welsh ethnic. I did that last time. Welsh ethnic group to 15.6%. So it's quite high compared to East Midland and England percentages.
It's not cover Scotland then.
So Scotland do their census, did this? It's just England and Wales. So underneath those high level groups, there's 19 ethnic groups underneath there, which are reported against. And this just shows, again, sorry, it's very small, but it just shows all the ethnic minority groups. So basically anything that's not white British. All of those have increased in size for across England and Wales, except the white Irish group. And for Derby, again, all of them had increased in size, apart from the white Irish group and the Caribbean group as well. So in Derby, after white British, the highest group was Pakistani with 8%, other white was 6.2%, and Indian was 4.8%, the largest ethnic groups. And the largest increases were the Pakistani group, other white, and any other ethnic group, which once you can look at that, the data that sits underneath there, you get a bit more of an idea of some of the groups that are in there. So, for example, the other white group includes Polish, Latvian, Slovakian, Romanian groups, and the any other ethnic group has got Kurdish, Sikh, Afghan, and also Slovakian in there. Because so once you look down at this data in a bit more detail, because they're write-in groups, so people can write in their ethnic group. Sometimes they're this similar ethnic group under different groups, under different high-level groups, if that makes sense. Trying to keep it brief, it doesn't always work. So the census also asked about national identity. So that's your assessment of your country where you belong or you think of as home. So in Derby, the percentage of people who did not identify with at least one UK national identity increased to 11.9%, 8.1%. And in terms of the top 5 specified non-UK only national identities, Polish, Indian, Pakistani, Italian, and Romanian in the top 5. Language, so the census looks at the top or your main language. So we've got the top languages on the left-hand side, excluding English. So that's for England, and the main increases were Romanian, Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian all increased compared to the previous census in 2011. So for Derby, we had 87.1% speak English as their main language, and that was a slight decrease from 90.5 in 2011. And looking at the main languages in Derby, apart from English, was Punjabi, Polish, Urdu, Slovak, Romanian, and Kurdish, and all of them have increased from 2011, with Romanian with the highest increase, which again you would expect compared to the other data we've looked at. And I've also just put on there about British Sign Language. They've got 447 British Sign Language users as their main language, which is the highest local authority in England and Wales. And then religion. So we've got 36.6% having no religion, or reporting having no religion, increased from 27.6%. Again, this reflects a national trend. And in Derby, we've got 40.2% describe themselves as Christian, which is a reduction from 52.7% the last census, and 11.1% describe themselves as Muslim, which is an increase from 7.6%. Yeah, and that graph on the right there just shows any increases or decreases. That is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the key headlines, and that's all from just those top two releases, the demography and ethnic group releases. There's also got labour market, travel to work, housing, education, health, disability and unpaid care. There's one on UK armed forces veterans and sexual orientation and gender identity. So there's a lot more data to get through. And also at the moment, we're just looking at it at city-wide level and trying to share some of those headlines, but they're releasing this data right the way down to smaller Alp areas, so the neighbourhood areas as well. So when we get a chance, it'd be really interesting to see how that data is different across the city. I've got a couple of links on here. There's a NOMIS area profile, which you can go on and just get the headlines for any local authority area for the census. And then there's a census maps, which is an ONS tool, which does allow you to drill down into those detailed areas if you want to. So you can look at ethnic groups at different parts of the city. And also our Info for Derby website is being updated as we speak. So more and more information is going to be on there from each of these releases.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for that presentation. A lot of detail, and it's still headline figures and more to come.
Just, I mean, I know we've got a lot more detail to come in really, really important areas, but do you think there's a kind of pattern emerging of challenges for the medium to long term for Derby? Or do you see them more as opportunities?
That's what we're still trying to.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult to say at this point. You know, I mean, obviously we can see the headline trends there, but I think it is about trying to kind of, you know, understand the sort of the fuller picture to enable us to inform actually, you know, I think our service planning at a more detail there, basically. But there's no doubt there's, you know, it's a very rich source of insight for us. I think the other thing that I think I was saying to you at the pre-meet is it's about using the sort of the other broader insight that we have, you know, to actually, you know, to inform areas, things, you know, like housing standards, you know, which is obviously one of the areas that as a council we're trying to tackle. So you know, it is about using that collective insight. And actually, I don't know whether you've ever looked at info for Derby, but actually that does bring together a range of different data sources. So if you ever want a kind of a snapshot of your ward or locality, it's really good. So
Yeah,
it's a bit of a plug, but I mean, it's maybe something we can do more broadly with councillors and maybe across the different scrutiny boards, because actually the intelligence would inform all of the boards.
So that's a really good idea, that you know, going down to neighbourhood and boards to sort of give them, share the information. Yeah.
Just one more specific question on age breakdown, where towards the older years, Derby's is below the average for the number of people. So can I extrapolate from that the life expectancy in Derby as you get older decreases, or is it just
When we wait for the
within
health data.
statistical norms? Is it statistically significant?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably difficult to say, but I think it's something to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
The one that mentioned earlier, the growth in the population is lower than the region and the country. Surely one of the things we're going to look at is our boundary, you know, the city council boundary. When we want to meet the demand of people living in Derby in terms of housing, we're always negotiating with Amber Valley, Arawash, in particular, to build more houses in their district areas to accommodate the growing population of Derby. And so the boundaries, and it could well be with the elderly, you know, and I think we were decreasing in numbers in the 45, 49, you know, that sort of a active, probably working, and when they're looking for where to live, they might be finding the newer developments which are outside the city boundary. And therefore that's worth looking into further in terms of, and the arguments we've made, I don't know over how many decades now, that we need to expand our borders for the city. And but Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. You know, the other districts don't want to. They'd rather have the developments and have the additional council tax income than give up. It would require some sort of government edict to say the boundaries need increasing of the city. And that's probably something that we need to look at in terms of analysis and mechanisms. Every time we've tried to ask Amber Valley or Arawash, predictably they say no.
So just another question, are we likely to get snapshots of all the other things coming to this board, or might they go to the most appropriate board? So for example, education, would that go to CYP, or would it go?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's for the relevant scrutiny board to request the update. I mean, I think what we'll do is once we've got the kind of all of the information that ONS is going to release, essentially, because I know Natalie and the team are looking at kind of you know putting it all together into you know one place.
Yeah.
So what we can do is share that with the relevant scrutiny boards and all councillors, you know, and then you know if you would like further analysis doing or presentation, you know. So I think what might be helpful is to try and join it up with actual, you know, with service leads so that they can kind of put their take on this. Because obviously what we're doing is we're presenting the insight. We don't necessarily, you know, not able to anticipate all of the potential impacts that obviously services will be able to do. And partners to a certain extent. I think it's also about sharing this information with, you know, police, fire, health, you know, that the kind of, you know, the broader partnership. I mean, the other thing that we're doing is also having conversations with our kind of nearest neighbours around, you know, Nottingham City, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, in light of devolution, because actually it's about looking at the trends, you know, across the broader combined authority area.
And I think for this board, communities and neighbourhoods. We do need to have an understanding of the city and the region and the Derby and Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire. But also to go down, we need presentations of not only the board, neighbourhood boards and local councillors giving their neighbourhoods analysis. We probably need to have an overview, being the communities and neighbourhoods.
Yeah. To be honest, those links on there are brilliant because some of the data available there,
yeah,
absolutely stunning. So you can drill right down.
Yeah, yeah.
I've just been flicking down into that, and it's very comprehensive. So eat your heart out.
But I mean, thank you for requesting the item because actually I do think the census is really important for us as a council, you know, to and thank you for inviting us along.
Right.
Yeah.
The other one is I'm not as keen looking at the detail, which I should be. I mean, in terms of policing, sort of the demands of policing in terms of how that works, and for the city, we probably need to have a better voice about what it means for the city and how it's being catered for in the city. Around policing, and like you say, health, it could be health, education.
And to a certain extent, just to bring it back to the partnership board, I do think the partnership board's got a role to play in terms of, you know, kind of raising the needs and the aspirations that we have as a city to try and influence service delivery across the piece.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Brilliant.
And thank you for everybody for staying the course.
Yeah.
Others have come and gone.